This is examples of music for Module 27. We'll cover all 5 objectives at the same time. 27.1 says define the terms of applied chord and secondary dominant. 27.2 says define tonicization and modulation. 27.3 says identify, notate, and label secondary dominant chords 5 of 5 in any key. 27.4 says identify and label secondary dominant chords 5 of 5 in real music examples. 27.5 says notate resolutions of secondary dominant 5 of 5 chords with proper voice leading. The term applied chord and the term secondary chord mean the same thing. This piece contains an applied 5 of 5 chord.
Ich denke dein, wenn durch den Hain der Nachtigallen Akkorde schallen. Wann denkst du, nein, wann denkst du, nein, ich denke dein.
Alright, as we look in this piece, the applied chord happens twice. It happens at the end of the second stanza right here, and then it resolves to this chord, and then it is restated immediately afterwards and resolves again. This piece is in the key of D major. When we get to this chord, we see that we have an E, G sharp, B, D chord. That's an E major minor 7th chord. In the key of D major, we usually expect the root note E to yield a minor chord, a 2 chord. But in this case, we have the root is E, and we have an accidental on the G giving us G sharp, resulting in a major minor 7th chord. This major minor 7th chord has a dominant function, but it's not of the key that we're in. It does provide tension moving to the actual dominant of the key, this A chord, A, C, E. So this E major minor 7th chord is the secondary dominant of the piece. It is a 5 chord of this 5 chord. It is then restated right here, the same pitches, resolving to the same chord. So we have another 5 chord of now this 5 chord. But as the piece goes on, it remains in D major. The piece doesn't harmonically shift to the new key of A major, it stays in D major. So we call this a tonicization rather than a modulation. We expect the resolutions of a secondary dominant to resolve to the dominant of the key. So if this 5-7 of 5 is an E major minor chord, we expect it to resolve to the dominant of the key to this A chord, and it does. As far as voice leading, we treat it the same as if this were a regular old 5-7 chord moving to a 1 chord. But our leading tone in this case is not the leading tone of the original key that we're in, it's the leading tone of the key that we're tonicizing for just a moment. The key that we're tonicizing is A major. Therefore, the leading tone is this G sharp, so we expect that to go up by step, which it does. The chordal 7th of this is the D. We expect that to go down by step, which it does. And we expect the other notes to move in manners that avoid parallel fifths. Let's hear it again.
Ich denke dein, wenn durch den Hain der Nachtigallen Akkorde schallen. Wann denkst du, nein, wann denkst du, nein, ich denke dein.
Here's another example of a secondary dominant, the 5 of 5. This one happens very quickly from this chord to the resulting chord. So this one is moving in preparation for this half cadence that happens here before the melody is restated. Secondary dominants are often used to intensify the feeling of the dominant that's coming up. We're in the key of G major. The dominant of G major is D. The secondary dominant of G major is a 5th above D, so A major. And that A major chord happens here in inversion. We have A, C sharp, E. If we think of this G as part of the chord, we can think of that as the chordal 7th. A, C sharp, E, G. The temporary tonic is D, therefore the temporary leading tone is C sharp, so we expect C sharp to resolve up by step, which it does. We expect the G chordal 7th to resolve down by step, which it does. And we expect it to resolve to the dominant of the original key, which it does. It also remains in the key of G major immediately following the secondary dominant. Therefore, this is a tonicization and not a modulation. Here's one more example of secondary dominant. This piece is in the key of G minor, so we have a minor key. One way of finding secondary dominants is to look for accidentals in the piece, because there often will be accidentals with secondary dominants. We have to keep in mind in minor keys, even if there are no secondary dominants, we often see accidentals because the 7th scale degree of the minor scale collection is often raised to create a leading tone in cases of the leading tone chord as well as the dominant chord. If you listen to this selection again, this area going to this area has a very dominant sound and it feels unfinished. And then when it goes to this one, it has a tonic sound and it feels finished. So for example, we do see a bunch of F sharps down here, but if we evaluate what those chords are, those are some D major chords moving to G chords. Those are just traditional 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, which is what we've had before. So no secondary dominance involved here, but up here is a different story. If we're in the key of G minor, we see an A, C sharp, E, G chord. A, C sharp, E, G chord is not a traditional chord in the key of G minor, but it is the secondary dominant of that key. So if G minor, if G is the tonic, D would be the dominant, and the dominant of that is A, an A, C sharp, E, G chord for the 7th. The chord that it's tonicizing is this chord, the D chord, the dominant of the original key. We expect at least leading tones to resolve up by step to the new temporary tonic of D, C sharp to D, C sharp to D. We expect the G, the chordal 7th, to resolve down by step, which it does. The secondary dominant chord occurs here and resolves here, and then that's just repeated several times for emphasis. Secondary dominant, resolution. Secondary dominant, resolution.